Nobody thought it would reach this point. Not after the first wave of clips, not after the reactions, the debates, the internet tearing every second apart frame by frame. Most people assumed the situation had already peaked, that whatever damage could be done had already been done. But then something surfaced that shifted the entire tone overnight. Because this time, the movement didn't come from the outside. It came from inside the situation itself. According to multiple insiders, King Harris didn't stay silent anymore. He didn't post. He didn't go live. He didn't try to control the narrative publicly. Instead, he allegedly reached out behind the scenes, directly to 50 Cent. And not in anger, not in defiance, but in desperation. That's the word that changed everything. Because desperation implies something very different than frustration. It suggests urgency, fear, the kind of pressure that doesn't come from what's already happened, but from what's about to happen. Sources claim the message wasn't casual. It wasn't a warning or a demand. It was emotional, direct, the kind of communication that comes from someone who feels like the situation is slipping beyond control. And if that's true, then the question becomes unavoidable. What exactly is still coming? Because let's be clear, what the public has already seen was enough to shake the internet. Clips that sparked debate, divided opinions, and forced people to question the image surrounding T.I. and his family. So if those were just fragments, just pieces, then what does the full picture look like? That's the part no one can answer right now. But the reaction, that tells its own story. Because people don't beg for something to stop unless they believe what's next could make everything worse. And that's where the situation starts to feel heavier than just content. Because this isn't just about a documentary anymore. It's about control. Or more specifically, the loss of it. For years, the image around T.I. wasn't just about music. It was about structure, discipline, authority, a carefully built identity that extended beyond the stage and into his role as a father, a leader, a public figure. And for a long time, that image held. But behind that image was a reality that played out in real time, through viral moments, public disagreements, and the constant pressure of growing up in front of millions. King Harris didn't enter the spotlight. He was born into it. Every phase of his life documented, every shift in personality analyzed, every mistake amplified. And as he got older, the gap between expectation and reality became harder to ignore. Because while the public saw a legacy being passed down, what they were really witnessing was a young man trying to define himself under a microscope. Now take that pressure and layer it with something else. The idea that there are private moments, real, unfiltered moments, being packaged, edited, and prepared for public release without your control. That's not just exposure. That's vulnerability on a global scale. And according to insiders, that's exactly what's at the center of this alleged message. Not anger, fear of what hasn't been shown yet. Because the clips already released, people are now calling them controlled chaos, carefully selected moments that spark reaction, but don't necessarily tell the full story. Which raises another question. If those clips were enough to create this level of reaction, what happens when context is added? Or worse, when it is? Because here's where things take a more complicated turn. While all of this is happening behind the scenes, 50 Cent hasn't slowed down. If anything, the rollout appears to be accelerating. More hints, more pressure, more attention. And that's what's making this situation feel less like a moment and more like a buildup. Because when one side is trying to contain something, and the other side is continuing to push it forward, that tension doesn't just disappear. It escalates. Now the conversation isn't just about what's right or wrong. It's about timing, intent, and control over the narrative. Because documentaries aren't just about showing reality. They're about framing it. Every cut, every transition, every moment included or excluded shapes how the audience understands what they're seeing. And once people start realizing that, they stop asking, "Is this real?" and start asking, "What am I not being shown?" That shift is powerful because it turns viewers into investigators. And right now, that's exactly what's happening. Across platforms, people are dissecting everything. Old clips, new footage, interviews, body language, tone, silence. Looking for patterns. Looking for inconsistencies. Looking for the truth somewhere between what's visible and what's missing. But the deeper people dig, the more complicated it becomes. Because there's no clear center anymore. Just layers. Layers of footage. Layers of interpretation. Layers of intention. And somewhere in the middle of all that is a family being watched in real time. That's what makes this situation different. It's not just unfolding publicly. It's evolving. Because every new detail doesn't just add to the story, it reshapes it. And now, with this alleged behind-the-scenes message from King Harris, the tone has shifted again. From curiosity to concern. Because if someone directly involved is trying to stop what's coming next, then whatever that next is carries weight. Real weight. And that's why the silence from all sides feels louder than ever. No confirmation. No denial. No explanation. Just movement happening where the public can't see it. Which only leads to one place. Speculation. But underneath all the noise, all the theories, all the reactions, there's one question that keeps coming back. What happens when the next piece drops? Because if there really is more footage, more context, more moments that haven't been seen yet, then everything people believe right now could change instantly. Again. And if that happens, this won't just be another viral situation. It'll be a turning point. Not just for the people involved, but for how stories like this are told, controlled, and consumed. Because right now, nothing feels finished. Nothing feels settled. It feels like the middle of something. Something still building. Something still moving behind the scenes. And whatever comes next might not just add to the story. It might redefine it completely. Nobody saw this coming. Not after the clips, not after the reactions, not after the internet had already torn the situation apart from every angle. Because just when it felt like things couldn't get any more intense, everything shifted again. This time it wasn't another viral clip. It wasn't a public reaction. It was something happening behind the scenes. Quiet, direct, personal. And at the center of it, King Harris. According to multiple insiders, he didn't stay silent this time. He didn't sit back and watch the narrative unfold around him. Instead, he made a move that nobody expected. A move that instantly changed how people started looking at this entire situation. Because the claim is he reached out. Not publicly, not for attention, but privately, directly to 50 Cent. And it wasn't aggressive. It wasn't confrontational. It was something else entirely. Desperation. That's the word being used by people who say they understand what happened behind the scenes. Desperation. Urgency. The kind of energy that doesn't come from ego, but from fear of what's about to happen next. Because according to those same sources, this wasn't just a casual message. It wasn't a simple slow down or relax. It was emotional. It was intense. The kind of conversation where every word carries weight. And the message was clear. Stop the rollout. Think about that for a second. We've already seen clips that shook the internet. Clips that divided the culture. Clips that made people question everything about T.I., his image, and his family dynamic. So if King Harris himself is stepping in behind the scenes, asking, no, reportedly pleading for it to stop, then what exactly is still left in that documentary? What hasn't been released yet? Because whatever it is, it's serious enough to trigger that kind of reaction. And that's where the situation starts to feel different. Up until now, everything felt like content, drama, a viral moment unfolding in real time. But this feels personal. This feels like something that goes beyond entertainment. Because when someone moves like that, quietly, urgently, it usually means one thing. They know what's coming next. And that's what has people uneasy. Because while King Harris is allegedly trying to contain the situation, trying to stop it before it escalates further, the other side doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. In fact, according to multiple online discussions, it feels like the opposite is happening. More clips, more hints, more pressure. And that's where the tension really starts to build. Because now this isn't just about what's already been exposed. It's about what's still coming and whether anyone can actually stop it. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. You have a young man who grew up in the spotlight, every moment documented, every mistake amplified, every reaction judged. That alone is pressure most people can't even imagine. Now add this on top of it. A documentary, allegedly filled with private moments, behind-the-scenes footage and interactions that were never meant for public viewing, being released piece by piece, without your control. That's not just pressure anymore. That's exposure. Because according to multiple insiders, the clips we've seen so far, they're just fragments, pieces pulled from something much larger, something more complete, something that tells a fuller story. And if that's true, then somewhere out there, there's a version of this narrative that hasn't been fully revealed yet. A version that could change everything. Now imagine knowing that exists and having no control over when or how it gets released. That's the position King Harris is reportedly in. And suddenly, that alleged message doesn't sound surprising anymore. It sounds necessary. Because at a certain point, this stops being about views, clicks, and viral moments, and starts becoming something that can actually impact real lives. And that's where the situation crosses into dangerous territory. Because now you've got two forces moving in opposite directions. On one side, someone trying to contain the damage, trying to slow things down, trying to prevent whatever comes next. On the other side, someone known for strategy, for timing, for understanding how narratives are built and how to keep people watching. And when those two forces collide, things don't settle. They escalate. And that escalation, it didn't take long. Because shortly after those rumors about the private outreach started circulating, another clip surfaced. And this one felt different, heavier, more serious. According to multiple reposts, the clip allegedly showed a moment involving King Harris that had never been seen before. Not just another tense interaction, not just another viral snippet. Something deeper. Something that shifted the tone completely. Because this time, the reaction wasn't just debate. It was discomfort. People weren't just arguing in the comments. They were questioning why the footage was even out there in the first place. This don't feel right. This going too far now. Why is this public? Those kinds of reactions started flooding every platform. And that's when people started connecting the dots. Because the timing, it felt too precise. Right after the alleged outreach. Right after the attempt to stop things. A new, more intense clip drops. Coincidence? Or something else? That question is what pushed everything into overdrive. Because now, it doesn't just feel like a rollout anymore. It feels like a response, like a message, like something being pushed forward, despite what's happening behind the scenes. And that's why this situation feels so unpredictable right now. Because nothing about it feels finished. Nothing feels controlled. Everything feels like it's building towards something bigger, something we haven't fully seen yet. So now the real questions start to take over. What exactly is in the unreleased footage? Why did King Harris react the way he allegedly did? And if more content is coming, what happens when it finally drops? Because at this point, one thing is clear. This isn't just another viral moment. This is a story still unfolding in real time. And whatever comes next, it might not just add to the narrative. It might completely change it. And that's when the internet stopped treating it like entertainment. Because up until this point, it was easy to frame it as content. Clips, reactions, breakdowns, debates, the usual cycle. Something drops, people talk, sides form, and it fades. But now, it didn't feel like that anymore. Now people were asking a different question. Is this personal? Because once that idea enters the conversation, everything changes. Suddenly, it's not about what's being shown anymore. It's about why it's being shown and who it's aimed at. And that shift hit harder than anything before it. Because according to multiple online discussions and alleged inside chatter, people close to T.I. weren't watching this unfold quietly anymore. There were reports of frustration building, pressure increasing, conversations happening behind closed doors that nobody outside the circle was meant to hear. The kind of conversations that don't trend online, but decide what happens next. And the tone around it, it wasn't calm. It was tension. Because at this point, this wasn't just about clips circulating on the internet. It was about reputation, legacy, family structure, everything that took years to build suddenly being questioned in real time by millions of strangers online. And when that kind of pressure hits a public figure's family, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. Right into the center of it all again is King Harris. A young man who didn't choose the spotlight but grew up inside it. Every phase of his life documented, every mistake amplified, every reaction turned into discussion material for the internet to dissect. And now, his own life, his own family narrative was being turned into content again. In real time. That's where the emotional weight of this situation starts to surface. Because it's no longer just about public perception. It's about what it feels like to live inside that perception when you have no control over how it's being shaped. And that's why the conversation online started shifting. At first, it was curiosity. Then it became debate. Now it's discomfort. People weren't just asking, what's in the documentary? They were asking something much heavier. Should this even be happening? And that's where the divide deepened. One side still stood firm on transparency. Truth should come out. Nothing is off limits if it's real. But the other side pushed back just as hard. This isn't truth-seeking anymore. This is exposure without boundaries. This is someone's personal life being edited, packaged, and consumed like entertainment. And in the middle of that argument sits one name that keeps coming back into the center of everything. 50 Cent. Because whether people agree with the rollout or not, one thing is undeniable. He understands attention. He understands timing. And more importantly, he understands how narratives behave once they hit the internet. And that's exactly what makes this situation feel different from typical celebrity drama. Because it doesn't feel random. It feels structured. Like something being revealed in layers instead of all at once. Like momentum being built instead of information being dropped. And that's why people started paying closer attention to the pattern. When clips drop, when reactions spike, when silence follows, then another clip appears. It doesn't feel accidental anymore. It feels coordinated. And that's where the suspicion grows. Because now the question isn't just what is being shown. It's how it's being assembled. And that idea alone changes everything. Because if footage is being selected, framed, and released in a specific order, then the version the public is seeing may not be the full story. It's one version of it. And that's where the conversation fractures completely. Behind the scenes, according to unverified claims circulating online, tension is rising even further. Not just frustration, but strategic concern. Because once legal teams start getting involved, the situation stops being about public opinion and starts becoming about control. Control over footage. Control over rights. Control over what can be released and what can be challenged. And that's when the stakes get real. Because now it's no longer about what people think. It's about what can legally be shown. And who gets to decide that? Then came another layer of pressure. A post, anonymous, unverified, and quickly deleted, but already screenshot and spread everywhere. It claimed something simple, but dangerous. King Harris allegedly reached out again. Not once, but twice. And this time, the message wasn't just concern. It was urgency. According to the circulating claim, the message wasn't about ego or image. It was about protection. This is bigger than me. This is affecting my whole family. Stop this before it goes further. Whether real or not, the reaction to it was immediate. Because it reframed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just a rollout. It wasn't just commentary. It wasn't even just controversy. It was something that people started associating with consequences. Real consequences. Because once something like this goes beyond the internet, beyond reactions and hashtags, it starts affecting real relationships, real reputations, real pressure behind closed doors. And that's the part people don't see when they're watching clips online. The impact doesn't stay on screen. It moves into real life. And that's why the tension feels so high right now. Because every new clip, every new rumor, every new silence adds another layer of uncertainty. And uncertainty is what keeps the internet locked in. Not answers, not closure, just the feeling that something bigger is still coming. So now the situation sits at a breaking point. Publicly, it looks like debate. But underneath it, it feels like something still unfolding. Something not fully revealed. Something still being shaped in real time. And that leaves one final question hanging over everything. If this is what the situation looks like now, before everything is fully out, what happens when the next piece drops? Because at this point, nobody believes the story is finished. They just believe it's waiting. Nobody knows where the line is anymore. And worse, nobody knows if it's already been crossed. Because at this point, the situation has stopped feeling like a rollout, stopped feeling like commentary, and started feeling like something sitting right on the edge of control. Then came the next rumor. And this one didn't need confirmation to hit hard. A final piece of footage. Not released, not shown, not leaked. Just mentioned. A clip allegedly being held back. And according to the whispers spreading across forums and private circles, this one isn't like the others. This one changes everything. Now normally, that phrase would mean nothing. It's been used before in this same story, over and over. Every new clip, every new reaction, every new wave of speculation came with the same warning. This changes everything. But this time, people didn't dismiss it as hype. Because the reaction felt different. The tone online shifted. Even the way insiders were speaking changed. Less excitement, more hesitation. Like people weren't building anticipation anymore, they were bracing for impact. CT. And that's when the question became unavoidable. What is in that final clip? And why hasn't it been released? Because if what the public has already seen caused this level of chaos, then whatever is still hidden isn't just additional content. It's the missing center of the entire narrative. And that possibility alone was enough to push everything into overdrive again. Within hours, the internet lit up. Not slowly, not gradually. Instantly. Every platform at once. X flooded with debates. TikTok turned into non-stop breakdown loops. YouTube filled with analysis videos uploaded in real time. Creators dissecting every frame like they were solving a case instead of reacting to content. And every corner of it was asking the same question. Has this gone too far? But something had changed. Because this time, the content didn't feel like entertainment anymore. It felt heavier, more personal, more intentional. And that shift altered everything. On one side, you still had supporters of 50 Cent saying the same thing. If it's real, it should be shown. Truth doesn't need protection. But on the other side, the pushback wasn't just stronger now, it was sharper. This isn't truth-seeking anymore. This is exposure without limits. This is a family being turned into a storyline. And that argument didn't stay online anymore. It spilled into the industry. Rappers, commentators, and media voices, who usually avoid conflict, started speaking up more directly. One went live saying it clearly. This isn't how you handle people's lives. There are lines. Another countered just as firmly. If it's real life, why are we pretending it shouldn't be seen? No middle ground. No neutral space. Just a widening split. And the pressure kept building on everyone involved. Because now it wasn't just about what was being shown. It was about what it meant. Then came one of the most viral takes of the entire situation. A media voice summed it up in one sentence. This feels like something we weren't supposed to see. And that line hit harder than any clip, because it introduced a new idea into the conversation. That maybe the issue is what's in the footage. It's that the footage exists at all in public space. And once that thought took hold, the entire narrative shifted again. Now people weren't just reacting. They were questioning the act of watching. Why are we seeing this? Who decided we should see this? And what does it mean that we are? That's where things became unstable. Because once an audience starts questioning the legitimacy of what they're consuming, trust breaks. And without trust, every clip starts to look edited. Every cut starts to look intentional. Every silence starts to feel strategic. And that's exactly what happened next. Viewers began dissecting everything. Frame by frame. Pause by pause. Comparing timelines, outfits, background changes, emotional tone shifts. Some clips looked like they belonged to completely different moments in time, yet were being interpreted as one continuous narrative. That realization changed the conversation again. Now it wasn't just what happened. It became, what version are we being shown? And that question doesn't have an easy answer. Because it doesn't come from information. It comes from doubt. Meanwhile, behind all of this, silence remained. No official statement from T.I. No clarification from King Harris. No direct address from 50 Cent. Just silence sitting in the center of a storm that keeps getting louder. And that silence is what's making the situation feel heavier than the content itself. Because when everything is loud except the people directly involved, the audience fills the gap. With theories, with assumptions, with speculation that grows faster than facts. Then came the final escalation of this phase. A leaked screenshot. Not verified. Not confirmed. just spread. It allegedly showed a private exchange tied to King Harris's attempts to intervene behind the scenes. And it didn't matter whether it was real or not, because the reaction was instant. Screenshots don't need verification to become narrative fuel. They only need attention. And that's exactly what happened. The internet locked onto it immediately, treating it like a missing puzzle piece finally appearing mid-chaos. But instead of answering questions, it created more. Because now people aren't just asking what's real. They're asking what else exists, what hasn't been seen, what's still being held back, and who is deciding when it comes out. At this stage, the situation has moved far beyond a documentary. It's no longer about clips, no longer about reactions, no longer even about the individuals at the center of it. It's about control. Control of narrative, control of timing, control of perception. And the terrifying part, nobody can clearly see who actually has it. And that's why this still doesn't feel finished. Because every time the conversation slows down, something else appears. Another rumor, another clip, another. Our silence that feels louder than words. And with each cycle, the same feeling returns stronger than before. This isn't closing. It's escalating. And whatever comes next might not just add to the story. It might completely redefine what everyone thought they already understood. And that's where everything starts to blur again. Because after all the alleged messages, the leaked clips, the industry reactions, and the growing pressure online, one thing still isn't clear. What is actually happening behind the scenes? Some people are convinced that King Harris really did try to step in, that he reached out not for attention, not for drama, but to slow things down before it went too far, to contain something he felt was slipping out of control. Others don't buy it at all. They say it's just another layer in a story that keeps expanding because attention is fueling it. Another rumor, another angle, another piece added to keep the momentum alive. And then there's 50 Cent at the center of it all. To some, he's exposing reality, pulling back the curtain on moments people normally never see. Controlled, calculated, but still truth-driven. To others, it feels different. Like the line between storytelling and intrusion is getting thinner by the day. Like the narrative is being shaped in real time, clip by clip, reaction by reaction, without anyone fully agreeing on where it ends. And that's where the divide really lives now. Truth versus exploitation. Exposure versus overreach. No middle ground, just two completely different interpretations of the same unfolding situation. Because the real problem isn't just what's been shown. It's what people believe is still coming. So now the question shifts to you watching this unfold. Where do you stand in all of this? Because depending on who you ask, this is either necessary transparency or a line that should have never been crossed. And the truth is, until something official drops, until someone directly involved finally breaks their silence, everything else is just interpretation. And right now, interpretation is running the entire story.